On December 25, 1991, the red flag of the Soviet Union, with hammer and sickle symbol, was removed from the Kremlin because it marked the end of the Soviet Union and the independence of 15 new countries. Mikhail Gorbachev, the last Soviet leader, officially resigned from the presidency of the Soviet Union and declared the fall of one of the world's superpowers. After the flag was taken down, the tricolor flag of Russia, white, blue, and red, was raised. At that time, the United States became the only remaining superpower in the world, following the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was seen as capitalism's victory over communism, and the world was certain that the era of Soviet dominance had ended. Soon after, the news broke that the Russian bear had died under the rubble of the Soviet Parliament building. However, the power that had long challenged the United States was not easily defeated. The Russian bear, accustomed to cold winters, had to rise from the rubble and reclaim its place on the world stage. In today's video, we'll learn how Russia managed to rise from the ruins of the Soviet Union and reach the top again. Despite the Soviet Union being the strongest rival of the United States after World War II, it was facing huge internal issues, unlike the United States, which appeared stable. On the surface, Russia was one of the first countries to send a man into space, among the first to develop nuclear weapons, and a leader in technology, scientific research, and military power. However, all of this came at the cost of the country's internal economy. The Soviet economy was in a disastrous state due to complete reliance on a communist, socialist system, unlike other nations. The state controlled production, from cars to shoes, clothing, and even food. Despite not being poor, the problem wasn't poverty but a lack of goods. The state determined the needs of citizens and set prices, theoretically making the system fair, but in practice, it led to supply shortages. The value of Russian money was almost useless, and people had to wait years to buy a car or stand in line for hours only to find that their size wasn't available in stores. Additionally, the Soviet Union's wealth from oil and gas resources was used to fund the arms and technological race with the United States. However, in the early 1980s, global oil prices collapsed, severely affecting the Soviet economy. Meanwhile, the Russian mafia spread across the country, often smuggling goods to satisfy public demand, as the people were angry that they couldn't even afford basic items like jeans, which were seen as a luxury in the West. Gorbachev's ideology promoted freedom of expression, which was a significant shift after decades of oppressive rule. People started to voice their concerns, and the Soviet Union's image was tarnished as they began to see the West as more prosperous, free, and comfortable. Despite Gorbachev's efforts to end the Cold War and open up the Soviet Union to Western cultures, the people began to see how much they were missing out on compared to the West. Gorbachev enjoyed international popularity, but was seen as the enemy within the Soviet Union. This led to a failed coup attempt in August 1991 to remove him from power. Though this attempt failed, many Soviet republics soon held meetings to discuss independence. By the end of December 1991, Gorbachev resigned, and Boris Yeltsin took over as president of Russia. Yeltsin faced a monumental challenge managing a state with an economy in ruins, and the second challenge was internal opposition, such as the Chechen separatists, who declared independence in 1994, leading to a brutal war with Russia. Despite Russian military strength, the war ended in defeat for Russia in 1996, which was a major embarrassment. Yeltsin also faced an economic crisis, and in his attempt to transition the country to a market economy, he implemented shock therapy, which led to worsening economic conditions. Unemployment rose, GDP shrank by 14.5% in 1 year, and inflation soared. The government slashed spending on healthcare and education, while poverty levels skyrocketed, with 85% of Russians falling below the poverty line. Despite these difficulties, Yeltsin's statements were reassuring, and he allowed more freedoms, such as selling property without official permission, which led many Russians to sell their possessions just to survive. In 1999, after many economic and political failures, Yeltsin stepped down and Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer, took over as president. Putin, who was born in 1952, did not witness World War II, but was keen on restoring Russia's power. He began his rule by waging war on Chechnya, defeating the separatists, and establishing control over the Russian mafia. He consolidated power, ensuring that key sectors like oil and banking remained under state control, and began to build up the Russian military. He also restructured Russia's federal entities, reducing them to 7 districts under direct state control. Despite criticism, Putin successfully restored Russia's identity and sought to revive its power, emphasizing the nation's history, including bringing back the Soviet anthem with altered lyrics. In 2008, Russia intervened in Georgia over the South Ossetia conflict, sending a strong message to the world that Russia had returned as a global force. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, further solidifying its dominance in the region. Through these actions, Putin secured Russia's position as a major global player, forging alliances with countries like Syria, Iran, and North Korea, while opposing Western influence. Despite facing international sanctions, Russia has continued to expand its influence in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America, and is now a significant force on the global stage. Will Putin continue to lead Russia towards global dominance, or will it eventually collapse like the Soviet Union? Share your thoughts in the comments.